Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Bark, Wag and Purr, and creator of companion animal psychology blog. My co-host, Kristi Benson, is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works at the Academy for Dog Trainers. We can't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your dog trainer, cat behaviourist, or veterinarian as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome, everybody, to the Positive Posting Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Kristi Benson. How are you, Kristi?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm really excited because we have a wonderful guest today. We're going to be talking to Cy Wooler about his book, which is coming out very, very soon, More Than Just a Dog, Understanding, Loving and Living with Dogs, an Essential Guide for Humans. And it's a wonderful book. I loved reading it. It is packed with advice and also wonderful stories. And it's just a really enjoyable read. And it's got so much information in it about our relationship with dogs. So I'm thrilled to chat with you, Cy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited.
So Cy Wooler has been training dogs for more than 10 years. He studied with the Academy for Dog Trainers, which is how Kristi and I come to know him, one of the most rigorous dog behavior and training programs in the world, and he specializes in training fearful and reactive dogs. In 2023, he worked with author and broadcaster Rory Cellan-Jones and his wife, Professor Diane Coyle, to help their Romanian rescue dog, Sophie, overcome her profound fears, bond with her people, and gradually discover the world, a journey that was followed daily by hundreds of thousands of fans. And that's been wonderful to watch. Cy came to dog training after 20 years as a sound engineer, so loud barking hardly registers on his personal decibel scale, which is wonderful. His own fearful, unhomable rescue dog, unhomable in quotes, Thompson, was the motivator for seeking out effective, evidence-based training methods and leaving his career in sound and stage to focus on working with troubled dogs and the people who love them. So this is his first book, and so I'm going to ask you to hold it up to the camera, please, so that people who are watching us on YouTube can see the cover. There you go. Wonderful cover. More Than Just a Dog by Simon Wooler, it says on the cover. Perfect. And it is published in the UK on February 13th. Thanks, Cy. And in the US and Canada on May the 13th. So it's coming soon to us here in North America. But in the UK, by the time this goes out, you can go out and get it now. In North America, you can pre-order, and you should pre-order because it's a wonderful, wonderful book. So, Cy, tell us about the book.
Tell you about the book. Well, the book was very much inspired initially by the experience of Sophie from Romania and Rory and Diane's determination to help her. And we were approached by our publishers, HarperCollins. I had to look on the back to remember. I can never remember their name. I don't know what it is. But HarperCollins approached me, having seen the story of Sophie on social media, and asked if I'd like to write a book. And it's something that actually had never really occurred to me, but I thought it was very exciting. And Nina was poking me in the ribs and saying, "Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it." So in the end, More Than Just a Dog is really a culmination of not just 10 years, probably almost close to 15 years of experience in the field, but reflections on my my education about dogs, how important it is to understand their learning experiences and how they learn so that we can help them in a genuine way. And that's busting some myths, it's telling stories, it's helping people to connect with their dogs, particularly if they're facing behavior problems. But in general, I kind of hope it's a an important read, an enjoyable and entertaining and at times humorous read, because I think we all need that in our worlds. And people who are dealing with dogs with significant emotional problems definitely need to be able to look at their relationship in a lighter way sometimes and get some respite from it too, I think.
It definitely is. I mean, it's very enjoyable and it is funny in parts too, which I think is very, very nice.
hopefully in the intended parts, which is always helpful.
So in the book, you use a lot of storytelling about your own life and your clients' dogs and their lives. And one of the things that stood out to me in the beginning was just how much you changed your life for Thompson. So I wanted to know just sort of like reflections on what are some of the favorite stories that you have from your clients about what they've done for their dogs. You know, these big things that we do for our dogs.
Yes, I think stories are hugely important. And the stories around Thompson were intended to show or illustrate that this is doable, that there isn't, it's not insurmountable, the challenge and the significant challenge that fear, reactivity, aggressive behavior can present for people. My client stories, it's always extraordinary to me just how many stories they have and how much they think about their lives with their dogs in terms of stories, in terms of their experiences together, and just how resilient they are to it, and how they can still see the funny side of things that they deal with. I mean, I just recently finished a 2.5 week residential with a dog called Troy, and uh, he's been 6 months in the UK, and was so terrified that he hasn't yet actually set foot out of the house. Um, and yet the stories that come out of people who have dogs like that are remarkable. So, for example, Troy, and I discovered this to my own amusement. Troy must be He's a German Shepherd dog Rottweiler cross with I suspect a bit of Jack Russell in there somewhere as well. But he would um at 2 o'clock in the morning, this shy, retiring, nervous dog would run down the corridor and throw himself spleen bustingly onto you on your bed, and then do a little spin and then run off again. And many of the stories that come out of a lot of people's lives with these dogs are those little moments of joy that their dog shows. So that little playful cheekiness, or that the first walk is often something that people will tell their story about. What stories can I? Because the book has stories of ill health and managing that. It has stories about um, finding, despite the determination to solve the problem, even if that means going through 6 different trainers, and they can still be witty about those moments where things just go sideways. So yeah, I mean, I think that life tends to be about stories, and certainly people's experiences with their dogs, because they're family members. There there are bound to be stories, and I think there's often stories of trying to include their dogs in things with the family and so on and so forth, that I think is just so endearing, and just shows how important they are to us and how important they become in a really short period of time.
And
Did that
that
answer the?
leads
I'm not even sure if that answered the question, to be honest. But me, tangent
it
man.
it leads very nicely into our next question, actually, which is because your book is really about the relationship between people and their dogs. And we can tell that just from the title, More Than Just a Dog. They're not just dogs. So why is that relationship especially important for fearful dogs?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think because certainly what I've realized over time, working a lot with both fearful dogs that are fearful and hide away, and dogs that are fearful and choose aggressive behavior as a means to fix that, to help them cope with that. One of the things I've discovered and come to understand even more greatly is just how important connection is for them, how important it is for them to feel not just safe in the environment that they're in, but safe with the people that they're with. And those people become what in human psychology they call secure bases, so that that the your dog can feel more confident about exploring new environments because they know that secure base is there to come back to. Um, and it kind of stabilizes their world. But I think equally, I'm sure a lot of us know what it's like uh, to have family members or friends who are suffering from mental health issues, and just how achingly painful that is, because you just can't help but feel a sense of empathy for them. And when you see dogs in obvious pain or fear, um, it's it's impossible not to see them as an uh, as someone in need of help, someone in need of desperately in need of um, support and sympathy and acknowledgement. And I think that just kind of connects with people. But the whole business of making a relationship is the first step to making it possible. And that's what more than just a dog is actually about, is making that relationship so that or giving, almost saying, if you're not doing nothing, if you're just concentrating on being with them, spending time with them, finding out what they think is fun and taking advantage of that, and just giving them space and openness and choice to grow into what is a complete and utter change in their lives, particularly if it's rescue dogs. If they're a rescue dog, this is a complete topsy-turvy, turn the world up on its head moment for them. Um, and they're usually dogs that weren't in great emotional shape to begin with. So, that my feeling about it is that we've got into a place in modern society where our expectation is that if dogs are upset or worried about something, they're going to get over it pretty quickly. They should get over it pretty quickly. And my question is why? Why should they get over it pretty quickly? I mean, there's almost a chapter on why shouldn't, ought not should be thrown out of the English dictionary, because uh, it's not about what should be happening or shouldn't be happening. It's about what is happening. And that's what we have to deal with and take care of. And there shouldn't be an assumption. There you go. I did it. I did it. I did it. Shouldn't. We mustn't assume that dogs will recover quickly. And that's Ripley digging up the sofa that you can probably hear. Nicholas, Ripley, want to be on telly?
Hello, Ripley.
Yes. So, that's my big motivation. That's my big drive, not just in this book, but in everything I do now, which is to um, n not just for people to recognize the relationship and understand that dogs are part of the family, but also to give themselves permission to kind of slow down and feel everything that they do feel. Because living with dogs that are upset 24/7 is hard. It's really, really hard. And too often, um, there's criticism of people, and there's an assumption in our society that if a dog is fearful um, or exhibits other behavior that may indicate that they're anxious, that something bad must have happened to them, and it must be the people who did it. And very often that means that people don't go for help. They don't look for help. And what I want to say is, we we're not judging you. We're not judging you. In fact, if anything, we're giving you kudos for looking for help for you and your dog. Um, and and we need to dispel that myth that that uh, that all dogs that behave in that way, that behave fearfully, have been mistreated. They can have been, but very often not by the people that are coming to ask you for help. So that's hugely important. Having empathy, not just for dogs, but for people too.
Our next question is jumping a little bit into kind of the I think we're going right from like the beauty to kind of the hard stuff. But one thing that did come up to me when I can't remember which part of your book I was looking at, but there was sort of at least mention of behavioral euthanasia, and I was thinking, okay, behavioral euthanasia can still be a little bit of a taboo topic, even amongst dog trainers who should be comfortable with these conversations. So how does I want your thoughts on how does this not really serve dogs or their guardians, the fact that we keep this as a taboo subject, and how do we sort of have these conversations in while recognizing that the aversive crowd tends to sort of sling at us this accusation that we go right to behavioral euthanasia whenever there's a dog that we can't handle, despite the fact that that is just wrong, and the fact that evidence actually shows that it's a very different story. So
Wow, that's a good
maybe
question.
briefly we could just touch on that before we go
Yeah,
on.
yeah. It's a really, really good question, and it's an important one, I think, because it's important to be able to say to people, I don't consider that it's my place to advise or recommend euthanasia. I've never had a situation where I've been required to do that. I imagine there are. I imagine some situations are either just so dangerous or the dog is in so much distress that that's going to be put up front and center as a real option, and may well have already been proposed by somebody in the mix, like a vet, for example. My duty is to say it is an option. It's an option that's on the table, and if you decide to take it, then you will get my support, unquestioning, non-judgmental support in that decision. The fact that the suggestion that as non-aversive trainers, we go straight to behavior euthanasia as a solution for a dog that we can't manage is baloney. And I'll put it out there. It's baloney, people. I think in that roughly dozen years of practice, I've had one client who's decided that that was the way that it had to go because they just felt their dog was too dangerous. She wasn't predictable enough in the house, and she wasn't predictable enough in public, and they were just it was getting to the point where they were incredibly stressed, and and they were worried that it was impacting on their place in the community, in the way that the community viewed them, and their lives were deteriorating as a result. And they made that decision, and I supported them in it, um, but both informally and formally. Um, it has to be there as an option for extreme cases. But I'm going to push back again on that accusation that you mentioned, Kristi, because if I'm faced with a dog whose behavior I'm not sure I understand, or I feel like I'm not making progress with it, my suggestion isn't going to be put your dog down. My solution is going to be, firstly, let's have a conversation about meds. So let's talk about whether or not there's a pharmaceutical solution that might help us at least. And the three of us know that medication for dogs, anxiety medication for dogs, is designed to make behavior modification easier to do, more effective, and likely to progress better. And that's the conversation I will have with people around meds. I will very pointedly say that I think meds is a frontline option, not a last resort, and we should see what that does in order to help us. I also think that if I don't understand, it's important to be honest with yourself and say, well, I don't understand that behavior. And then you go and you try and work out why that's happening. So you look at, you do the two things that actually, I don't go into a great deal in the book, but it's become increasingly apparent. And it struck me the other day, I was watching, something on YouTube. There was a guy talking about kind of communication methods and things like that. And actually, one of the things that came up very strongly was that it's not about talking; it's about listening. So you've got some resources with these guys who are faced with these really, really super difficult dogs. One is to listen, and the other is to observe. So listen to the human side of the relationship, and watch the dog side of the relationship. And usually you start to see, if you can't account necessarily for the behavior, you start to see somewhere where you can find an in. And that observational stuff is really, really important for me. My last my last client, uh, that I mentioned earlier, it was quite obvious that he came alive at night. And so we shifted most of the work from daytime to nighttime. So it was 3, 4 a.m. in the morning that we were doing stuff to try and help him become more confident. And that migrated into daylight hours. But that's, for me, those are the two most important things to try and, there are lots of things you can do before um, anyone starts to talk about euthanasia, and it's not going to be me, is my rule. That's going to come from the human client. They're going to say, I'm not sure we can cope with this, we can do this. And then the options will be, um, we can try for a rehome, we can look for somebody who's experienced in living with dogs like this and are prepared to take the risk with all of the necessary caveats and conditions. Um, and if they say, we're thinking that the best thing might be to euthanize him or her, then my answer is, well, I can't I can't advise you to do that, but it is an option that you have. It's and it's an understandable one. It's not one that you're going to get judgment for from me, and you'll get full support from me. And if you need me to speak to your vet, then I'll do that too. Um,
And
that was a long answer to a short question.
well, one of the things you touched on in there is your interactions with the clients and your conversations with the clients. So to bring it to a less heavy topic, let's talk about the idea of a dog's umwelt, and how do you explain to people how our understanding of the dog's umwelt can actually help to improve their relationship with their dog? So let's use it without the terminology. How do you like to talk to people about how understanding what things feel like and are like for the dog's experiences? How does that understanding help to improve their relationship with the dog?
Yeah, I feel like one of the strengths of your book was that you really brought it down to the dog's POV. We were doing a lot of like looking at life through the dog's eyes, and I think that's one way that we can really like work with the humans of the component. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's not necessarily easy to talk to our clients about that. So,
No, it's not, and they've got a lot of preconceived ideas, and and those preconceived ideas have come from some good, some they've found good reading for. They found good good people on the internet. They've also found some really atrocious ones, and they don't really know how to siphon them off. So they don't know what the filters are for good and bad advice and good and bad opinion, if you like. Um, and I think it's a conversation, I think, that you have once you've established a rapport with them. And actually, they very often, that is as a result of your rapport with their dog, even if it's a dog that is kept 15 feet away because it wants to shred bits of you. So the fact that you are focused on their dog and you're doing something to try and settle the situation down and make the dog connect with you. Um, easier with just fearful dogs rather than dogs that have aggressive responses, because it's a challenge to find a place where you are where it's all calming down, where you've got enough distance between you to manage the thresholds, if you like. But nonetheless, people recognize your attention to their dog, and then what I tend to do is I'm talking to them about what their needs are and their challenges are and what their worries about it are. And I'm fitting the solution that they're looking for into their life. Hello, doglet. It's a doglet. Um, into
Archer.
who's that?
Archer.
Archer. Hi, Arch. Um, so they're I'm trying to understand what their fears and concerns are too, because we're looking at helping two species here. And if we're only concerned about helping the dog, then I would say you're in the wrong business, right? Um, and here's a contentious thing that will doubtless get some comments. I don't think we're in the dog business. We're in the people business. Right? We're about helping people help their dogs and live better together, live more harmoniously together, live happier together, and understand what it is that's going on with the dog in order to allow for change in that. So rather than trying to drive change, they're giving dogs opportunities and choices and agency and chance to deal with the environment that they find themselves in. And for me, the human end of that lead is so important, right? You have to recognize the stress and the tension and the worry and the fear that is happening for those people 24/7. In the initial conversation, I think it is about listening, and it's about identifying where the stress points are, saying to begin with, right, how can we make that easier for you? And and coming up with things that are not about what I think they should need, but are about what they actually do need, and 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 gearing the plan, the ongoing plan to that. Yeah. It matters to me, it really matters to me because these people love their dogs. They're deeply distressed about what's happening. Sometimes they take it incredibly personally, and I think one of the first things to say is this isn't personal. You are actually important to them, and you're going to become more important to them. They're just scared.
Yeah, I think fear is something that, and I know Zazie has actually written about the science on this, but people tend to miss fear in dogs and in their own dogs even. So it's, I think, one of the most important messages that we can hammer home for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. I think it's I think it's about I think it's about not blaming people, not judging them. It's about giving them space and time, and it's about effectively telling them they're allowed to take time with their dog
Mm-hmm.
to help resolve it. Poor little guys, hey,
Mm.
bless their hearts. Every last one of them just tugs at my heartstrings every time I go in, and you can feel and you can hear the pain in the human voices about it, and the commitment, the absolute commitment to resolve it, because at the end of the day, people don't pay us if to go in and help them if they don't want to resolve that issue. If dogs are not so important to them that they want to keep them, you know, the Sophie story is particularly poignant in that sense because Rory's expectation was for a dog that he'd be able to go out to walk with because he's got Parkinson's disease. So it was quite important to exercise. And Sophie, as they thought, was going to be a real catalyst to that. And despite everything, despite hiding behind the sofa for months and toileting on puppy pads and refusing to eat, and later on barking at just about everybody that set foot in the place, they were determined that Sophie had become a member of the family, and you don't throw out members of your family as a rule, right? Unless something really hideous has happened. And um, so I think, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, my focus is about family, is about relationships, and everything that I do as in practical terms, be it training or be it emotional shift, it's about changing that relationship. It's about making that relationship stronger.
Mm. And I'm going to jump in with a question here because you mentioned Sophie. One of the questions we wanted to ask you, it's a writing question. So Sophie's a really famous dog that you worked with, and you waited until about halfway through the book before you really started telling some of her story in here. So what was your thought process, and how did you decide where to introduce Sophie into the book and where she would fit in?
Um, what a good question. We had a very deliberate structure for it. Nina, my partner, is a copywriter. She writes, and we talked a lot together about what the structure of the book was going to be. We also, it was important for me that it wasn't a retelling of Sophie's story. That it didn't start with Sophie. It didn't always come back to Sophie. Not that I don't love her, I do. She's absolutely adorable. I fall in love with all of them. Um, but it was important to be able to say uh, that Sophie isn't what's the word? That none of the dogs involved in the book, so none of the stories, and no dogs that people come to us about, none of them are dysfunctional. Right? None of this is not about abnormality. This is about normal, um, the normal approach to fearful stimuli, if you like. That these dogs are behaving as they would if they're now. The fact that they don't need to be afraid is kind of irrelevant, right? Because they are afraid. They think what they are looking at is dangerous, and therefore we have to respect that as being their state of mind. And I think Sophie was introduced where she was just because that was the right place to put that story. And she was going to be the fearful dog story, if you like. Although, many of them are. Um, I couldn't ignore it because, uh, Sophie, not only is Sophie's story a great one, but Diane and Rory have become really close friends. And, um, and without Sophie, nobody would have asked me to write a book. So it was important for it not to be about Sophie because Rory, apart from anything else, Rory's already written one, right?
Mm.
And it was hugely honest and insightful and generous of spirit. And so um, that wouldn't have been the point, and it wasn't the point. The point was not to write a how-to book, but to write a book that was, to some degree, it has some. Here's how it works. It has quite a lot of here's how behavior works. Here's what's going on in this situation, but it was more about helping people to understand that in order that they might be able to make some progress with their own dogs or just make an even closer connection with their dogs. And some people, I hope, that read it will have a fabulous connection with their dogs and will just um, get some mu- uh, uh, get some understanding of what the science and the principle is behind behavior, like you've done so well in Bark, Zazie, and I think more of us need to be doing that. We need to be shouting it from the rooftops. We need to be saying, this is what's going on. This is how behavior works. It's not something that you pluck out of the ether, but also that we recognize people who are having a hard time as well, and to say it's doable. This is doable. Um, you know,
So, Zazie, do we have time for one more question, do you think, or should we move into the books?
If you have time, you ask one more question, and then we'll move on to the books, and maybe we'll
Okay.
make it try and make this one a fairly quick question.
Okay.
I'll make it a brief answer. It's not the question that's the problem, is it? It's the answer.
Okay, so I'll give you a chance, a choice. Side. We have a nice, lovely one about writing styles, and then we have kind of a hard hitter, and you can pick. What are you in the mood for right now at the end of our?
Oh, you're going to keep it. You're going to keep the hard hitter serious as a secret. Go for the hard hit.
Okay. So, pack leadership and dominance thinking is tied up with toxic and hegemonic masculinity. So in this field of ours, which is largely woman dominated, I was just curious how you structure your practice to address these topics directly with your clients, and how do you sort of keep in mind the fact that you're working in a woman dominated field as you sort of myth bust, if at all?
Wow, that's interesting. Well, how did you describe that? The masculinity bit? That was brilliant. That was great.
Toxic and hegemonic masculinity, which are not my words. Yeah.
Hegemonic. That's a great word. Um,
There's a really good,
uh,
Zazie, do you remember the name of the doctor who did that really, really great webinar, who sort of pulled the threads of this apart?
No, I've forgotten.
We'll find
I
it
will
and you
find
can
it and put it in the show
yeah,
notes.
yeah, that sounds absolutely fascinating. So, answer to the question as brief as I can. Um, no. Uh, no, I don't think about it actually. Interestingly, I sometimes think about it outside of the consultation, but it's not something that, because here's the thing, the way that I tackle it is I don't unless it comes up, right? So I don't tackle pack leadership, the pack leadership myth or the dominance myth, unless it raises its head. And it's usually in a very innocent way that that happens. So they're not pushing it hard at me, but they're victims of, that indiscriminate level amount of different information that's available out there. So what I do is usually by then they've had some big aha moments about how learning really works. I've already done an introduction to how animals learn through association and how they learn through consequences, and done some little examples, and even demoed it on their dog if their dog is willing to come and spend some time with me doing it with food, right? Um, so they've already had some, oh wow, look at that. Look how quick that is. And I've had an opportunity to say, this is how that's working. This is what's going on here. And then I can say there's no evidence in behavior science for the dominance construct to be true with domestic dogs. And they buy in. They buy in completely. There's not even I've never once had a battle over that one. They've folded. They've just how I usually put it is take that idea, put it in a kitchen drawer somewhere, shut the drawer, lock it, take the cabinet out of the kitchen, put it in the car, drive to somewhere where you can throw it off the cliff and throw it off the cliff because we don't need it. It's not important.
Talking about
And
stories, that's a very
yeah,
powerful imagery.
It is. It is. Good.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Sai.
As for um the majority of women in the field, I don't know. I don't. I'm such a liberal. You see, I don't. It doesn't sweat me in a way. And I think. Well, I mean, look at the two of you. I mean, two mighty brains in in the field, and yeah, I don't. And to be honest, I don't know what to say in that regard. I, I'm kind of um I'm kind of relaxed about it. I don't feel threatened by either of you. That's
Darn it, we didn't come up with hard enough questions.
I can get better. Give me a chance.
Well, thank you, Sai. Thank you for coming to talk to us. We've got to move on to the book section, but thank you
okay.
so much for talking to us about More Than Just a Dog. And I'm going to ask you to hold it up to the camera again for us, please. More Than Just a Dog is out in the UK on February 13th, and it's out in the US and Canada on May the 13th. So here in North America, we can pre-order it, and I recommend it to everyone. It's a really great read. It's a really fun read. It's got some humor in it. It tells you so much about the relationship between people and their dogs. I think people are going to find it really useful as well as interesting and fun. So thank you for coming to tell us about that. And
you.
now we're going to move on to the books. So, Si, we'll start with you. Which book have you brought with you to recommend to us?
Well, I've slightly cheated. I thought about all kinds of books, and like I love the way um, that Alexander Horowitz writes, for example, lyrical, beautiful, kind of narrative uh, shape to her books. Thought about those, thought about many, but I came in the end. These are three books that I bought Nina for Christmas, which is they're by Sally Muir, and actually they are illustrative little illustrations and paintings and pictures of dogs with little commentaries underneath. And the artwork is just beautiful. And some of the commentary, some short, some a little longer, is uh, is personal and often profound, and just says what it's like in the case of that one to live with a rescue dog, and the the way that they get under your skin and into your heart and your soul. And there's a dog a day, which is again very sweet, beautiful, beautiful little illustrations all the way through. And then there's one that's yeah, old dogs, and how they just how much they mean. I mean, look at that, look at that. How gorgeous is
I
that,
love
you
it.
know? So that, yeah, Sally Muir, anything by Sally Muir, pick it up, definitely. So
Awesome.
that's a
Thank you.
visual. That's much more visual than textual. Textual?
Yeah, love it. Thank you for sharing those with us. Kristi, what book have you brought to recommend to us?
So a book we just started listening to when we're doing jigsaw puzzles is a novel called Woman at 1000 Degrees, and I'll probably butcher the last name. It's an Icelandic author named Hallgrímur Helgason. And it's a book about a woman who's close to the end of her life as she looks back upon, all of these things, husbands, children. I think she was kidnapped by the Nazis. Her great grandfather was um, prime minister of Iceland. So she had all these like adventures, but she's sort of reflecting back upon them with this like really crony cigarette smoking wisdom as she ponders how to essentially end her life. I think, she wants to set a date for her own cremation, which is the 1000 degrees reference. So it's mostly, I think, it's an interesting lens onto some historical events that you wouldn't necessarily consider from that perspective of someone who's just being kind of washed along by the tide. So anyway, I don't know if this is going to show up if I bring it up there, but
Yes, love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, great cover. Thank you. Yeah, good read. I like the sound of that. I always love how we pick such different books as well. So the one that I've picked um, is about reading and the love of reading and the joy of reading. It's called The Secret Lives of Booksellers and Librarians, True Stories of the Magic of Reading. And it's by James Patterson and Matt Eversman. And basically, it's like a lot of little short stories about booksellers and librarians. And so telling their stories, how they came to work in bookselling or how they grew up loving books and ended up being a librarian, and little stories about how they've helped people to find the books that they would enjoy reading and so on. So it's really lovely. It's got lots of different anecdotes in it. And the booksellers, they're not just American, there are some in Canada as well, including my local bookstore, Blackburn Books, which is why I picked it up because it was in my local bookstore. Blackburn Books gets a mention in here, which is awesome because they are a wonderful bookstore. So shout out to Blackburn Books. Thank you for being such an amazing bookstore, such a great supporter of my books, and for always ordering all the books that I want to read when you don't have them in stock as well. They're just amazing. Wonderful, wonderful bookstore. So that love of reading just comes out through the whole book. And then some of the librarian stories actually are kind of worrying. I guess they're historical in a way now, given current events in the US, but some of them are stories of them having books on their shelves and parents trying to get those books banned, and librarians saying, well, you get to choose what your child reads, but you don't get to pick what other people's children read. That's up to their parents. And so fighting the bans on these books. And in one of the cases, in the book, actually, the librarian very successfully fought a ban on some of the books, and basically the end result was that the library was closed. Or that's what happened next, was that the library got closed and turned into a different kind of building. So and one of the librarians actually says that there are lots of people watching and lots of people looking at what's happening, and people need to stand up. And I thought that's actually a very important message, especially at the moment. So it's a really lovely book, though. It's a really interesting read, and it's got lots of lovely stories. There's even one about a bookseller helping a customer who comes into the store and wondering why all the customers and all her staff are staring at them all the time while she's helping this customer. And then it's only when the customer has gone that one of her staff members comes up and says, "Did you know that was Robert Plant you were talking to?" And she had no idea. So that's really lovely. It's got lots of little anecdotes in there. Obviously, most of them not about famous people. There's even Judy Blume in here. And I grew up reading Judy Blume's books. I did not know that she now has a bookstore. So I really enjoyed reading that as well. So really fun and interesting book. So thank you. So before we finish, if people want to learn more about you, you have an amazing podcast, which I had the pleasure of being on recently. So tell us about your podcast and your socials and where people can find you.
Yes, it's the Sociable Dog Pod, and it's been a little neglected over the last few weeks because a lot of things have been happening. But I promise we're getting back to that. We usually try and punt things out on a Thursday, and really it's been about conversations, sometimes between me and Nina, but often between me and others, such as your fine self, Zazie, which was outstanding podcast. I really enjoyed that. Socials. Thank goodness for that. In fact, I think I probably ought to formally invite the two of you to come on mine, shouldn't I? Really now, and Kristi can get even grittier with her questions and answers.
Just give me like a couple of weeks to prepare. I'll come out swinging.
Yeah. So socials, Sociable Dog on Facebook. We are at Sociable Dog on X, formerly known as Twitter. We are Sociable Dog Training on Blue Sky and on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you.
And what we try to do is put out really good information. That's what we're all about, is putting out really solid information about what behavior is for and how it works.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming to chat with us today. Best of luck with the book. We'll be following it. I hope it does brilliantly well, because it really deserves to. And to everybody listening or watching, please make sure to hit the subscribe button to make sure that you always get future episodes of this podcast. And thank you for joining us today. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bus. See you next time.